I'm not even convinced that, and though I wholeheartedly agree with what you're talking about, and I think for quite a while we were saying, I mean, as early as or late as early, I don't know if early late, I can't even tell. I'm exhausted from all of this. In March. I was on Hayes saying like they should run on expanding Social Security just so they have something to run on, and they abandoned the wealth inequality argument, which I think was very problematic. Like I said on the program a couple of days ago, you don't even necessarily have to have a great answer for a problem, but clearly, by not acknowledging that there is a problem that most people are going through, when you acknowledge the problem, and Josh Orton is in the office, and we will talk about this because I remember we talked about it then back in the day. But President Obama, when he was candidate Obama, the way that he won Iowa, or at least one of the ways in which he won Iowa, was to go in there and say, there's a crisis in Social Security. Now, I disagreed with that characterization, but it activated the lizard brains of old people. Good for him in that regard, and got them to vote, because there is a sense that if you acknowledge a problem, that you're going to do something about it. I mean, and you've got people out there who, and we've got good jobs numbers this month, ostensibly. But again, the underlying problems with the job market are still there, and not acknowledging that, I think, came back to haunt people.
Well, that's always been a problem. It's the running away. It's not acknowledging,
yes.
We need to do better, but here's what we're doing. And again, I think this is all important, because I think this is why, again, the pundits
let me finish one more point.
Sure. Oh, yeah, sure,
even if this had only mitigated the loss slightly, like it was, every person across the board still lost. Maybe they would have lost by a couple of points less, whatever. It wouldn't have fundamentally changed things. At the very least, you're building a long-term narrative, which is sorely lacking. I mean, there is, and it could very well be just that we don't have a Democratic Party that fundamentally embraces these things. But gosh, guys, get cynical. And at the very least, sell it.
No, exactly. And we need to just, that's why I was sort of started off with what I started off with, is that you and I talked about this for months. Now, I'll admit, I still thought they were going to be able to hold on, which some of them were able to. I mean, first of all, a few of them came really close. I mean, Mark Begich, who won't, I don't think through the votes they have left, be able to get enough votes. And Kay Hagan, who I think in some other ways, by making education spending a big issue she ran on, they helped their cause. And I think it made things closer than they would have otherwise been. So I'm not saying that there was none of that, but it was disparate. It was different messages coming from different places, and you didn't have an overall overarching message. What they did, obviously,
you did, and that is just that, like, we're running away from anything that has really happened.
But I think, yes. And
that was the only overall message.
No, that was a huge problem. And it's not to say, look, Bruce Braley had some problems because he was a bad candidate. Yep. There are individual, Gene Shaheen still pulled out New Hampshire, right? What I can't stand, again, I hope I'm making myself clear here, is pundits who say one thing is going on, then the results happen, and it's different than they thought, and the next day they're saying, oh, something totally different is going on, without acknowledging that they were saying something else before. All right? I still thought that there was enough going on, that Democrats, they had good enough candidates and whatever to hold the House. But even when I thought that, you and I were still having these discussions that it was crazy that they were not talking about income inequality,
right,
that they weren't talking about, that most of them were not talking about raising Social Security, that they were not making it clear what they were going to do, that they were Democrats, that this is what they stood for, this is what we've always stood for. And those, obviously, some of that's broader party problems. Again, look at who lost. Right? I mean, I love my friend Howie Klein, who writes at Down with Tyranny, who labeled 2010 the Great Blue Dog Apocalypse.
Yep.
So now he's calling 2014 the Great Blue Dog Apocalypse too. They just lost. I mean, one or two of them retired, and Mike Michaud, who's clearly one of the more liberal blue dogs, but nonetheless was one and got a lot more liberal for his gubernatorial run, a lot more progressive. He lost too in that governor's race, and of course Elliot Cutler was part. I mean, there are, again, many factors in all of these, but overall, that's where we lost most of our seats. We're blue dogs and New Democrats. The Blue Dogs caucus, which was at 19, has now fallen to about 10.
Well, that's the story with Warner, right? In Virginia, is that
that's where I was going to get to next, which is go to your third way page.
Yeah.
By the way, everybody, I know you may feel icky doing it, but go to the third way page and look at who their co-chairs are on the third way page. You'll see Mark Udall there, who had to be brought, almost kicking and screaming to saying, I won't cut Social Security, because he'd been a grand bargain guy for a long time, but never came out for raising it. Kay Hagan is a second co-chair, and Jeanne Shaheen is third. Now, we're talking about 5 co-chairs here. And 2 of the 3 of them lost, and one of them almost lost to a guy moving up from
I'm not convinced that Shaheen, if she's running against a politician from New Hampshire, if she doesn't win, I mean, Scott Brown, all the polling reports, honestly, the exit polls on him said that like the number one factor was just that people felt like he was, sort of casually crossing the border, right? And had no real interest in New Hampshire, except for that was where he could run against somebody.
And he kept screwing it up. I mean, in a debate, they asked him about a part of New Hampshire. He didn't know where the hell, he knew where it was. He didn't know what the hell was going on there, and he had to come back later with a better answer. He still had his place of business listed as Massachusetts, which is hysterical. There were a number of things that kept connecting him back to Massachusetts, which he wasn't able to get away with.
And speaking about gubernatorial races, and as well, remember that Allison Schwartz lost the Pennsylvania government. That's
another co-chair.
Yep.
And she stepped down.
She lost the primary because
if you look at it,
her relationship with that and the change CPI and.
And now Mark Warner may not have been a co-chair. I looked at the page, but clearly he has to be a member of Third Way. And at this point, he may be the most conservative senator left. I mean, the caucus, frankly, with who they lost.
Joe Manchin.
I mean, I'm not happy because it's a smaller caucus and we don't have a majority. But losing Kay Hagan, Mark Pryor, if I don't want to lose Mary Landrieu, but if we do, at this point, Mark Warner is probably on the rightward end of that caucus. He's a guy who's called himself a radical centrist. His biggest thing he talks about all the time is a grand bargain, is cutting entitlements. He's opposes raising taxes on wealthy people. I mean, there's almost no way that he's a populist. He bought into all of this crap, and look at what happened. Out of nowhere, a guy whose name is literally part of the name of one of the biggest lobbying firms right next door in D.C. almost beat him.
Yep.
I mean, that's what we're talking about here, right? So, I mean, look at what happened to those. And again, there are some other cases where there were some more progressive people who lost again. I'm not saying that there's no one formula, but there are some very clear signals about when Democrats win and how they win versus when they lose and how they lose. And if you can't look at Mark Warner, Mark Pryor, and look at Kay Hagan and people like that, and then look at in the end, Braley may have lost, but he made a couple of serious personal mistakes and was running against, sadly, a very talented opponent, even though she's crazy, politically talented. But look at Al Franken and Jeff Merkley, who originally, you remember, both of those guys in 2008 barely won. I mean, Franken didn't win for 6 months until they counted it all. Merkley won barely also. They both had won in landslides this time and didn't have to worry the entire time, even though they had initially been listed as being vulnerable, and they were both in purple states. Why? Because neither of them have ever been shy about being progressive. When I see either of their names in the news, it inevitably is about them talking about something they've done that is progressive. I mean, that's just the way it is, Why in 2006 even though it was an election where a lot of Democrats won and pulled it out, but a bunch of them pulled it out very closely. Why in Ohio, a quintessential swing state, does current Senator Sherrod Brown beat the hell out of Mike DeWine by 12 points?
Yep.
Because people knew what he was for. He was talking against trade deals already for years. He had done that as a congressman. All right. This is what he was known for. And so I'm saying, the party, it definitely disadvantages Democrats that the party overall is, in some way is so feckless because they will not, set 6 points out and say, this is what we are for. And if you're not for this, you better make it clear you're not for this, because this is de facto what our party stands for. It's not a debate over Social Security. It's, this is what we stand for. And if you're different, you better make your own case.
This is what really struck me, too, in that Merkley race, is that not only did he win, Democrats outnumbered Republicans by even more than they did in 2008. That's a presidential election, right? I mean, that's stunning. That is perhaps one of the most telling stats that is out there. The idea that he pushed turnout that much more, I think is pretty amazing. I mean, and Merkley's opponent, yes, Merkley's opponent was horrible, but that does not account for more Democrats coming out, right?
That's right.
I mean, that is stunning.
Yeah, but, our opponent was horrible, but, Joni Ernst was talented, but she said some stupid things here and there. Cory Gardner got called out for lying in a debate. I mean, there are some Republicans. Look, Mitch McConnell made a number of unbelievable mistakes. I mean, he went into part of Eastern Kentucky and said, it's not my responsibility to bring jobs here. He got up a week before the election and talked about privatizing how he'd been happy to work on privatizing Social Security. It's not like he didn't make any gaffes.
Well, it's tough to capitalize on those narratives, I think. I mean, on those gaffes when you haven't built the proper narrative.
That's what we're saying, is that if those gaffes fit into the narrative is, we're going to make your life better. Here's what we've done already. We've brought the country back from where you guys took it. You had unified government, you, Mitch McConnell, worked with the Bush administration to destroy our economy, to bring it down. All right, you were there for Katrina. You were there for Iraq. I wasn't there. You're the one who screwed everything up. Now I'm going to join this movement that's making things better. But I think that would have helped Democrats. Again, though, a lot of blame. Sorry, I understand. And again, I'm no fan of Harry Reid, to be honest with you, after he undermined Rick Weiland in South Dakota. But I understand why Reid's people are so angry at Obama, and that stuff spilled out, because in the end, a lot of what his chief of staff is saying is correct. I mean, they were undermined a number of times, and it's very difficult to come back from that when the overall brand of your party, the guy at the top is screwing around with maybe cutting Social Security and is in love with charter schools and is somebody who said they were going to do a number of things like renegotiate trade deals but never even attempted to do it. And, and we can go on and on and on, and won't make their case to the public by telling the public who the bad guys are and who the good guys are in this equation and who screwed things up and who's making things better, because he doesn't want to say mean things about the other guys and still thinks that in some part of his brain that I don't understand, that maybe they'll sit down with me and make a good deal.